Rain tapped against the metal roof of Ethan Cole's auto shop like impatient fingers. It was late Friday afternoon in Maple Ridge, the kind of gray hour when most people were already home, but Ethan was still flat on his back beneath a car, oil on his sleeves, the old radio hissing through static and half-forgotten country songs. He was tightening the last bolt when the bell over the front door slammed hard, sharp enough to make him flinch. "Hello?" A woman's voice called out, shaky, almost breaking. Are you still open?" Ethan rolled out from under the car and wiped his hands on a rag. Standing just inside the doorway was a woman he recognized vaguely from the grocery store. Lena Park. She usually smiled while scanning his groceries. Today, her face was pale, her fingers clenched around her keys like they were the only thing keeping her upright. She didn't mention her car. She didn't even step farther inside. Instead, she blurted, "I know this sounds crazy, but would you pretend to be my date for one day?" Before Ethan could process the words, small footsteps padded out from the back room. His 8-year-old daughter Mia stopped short, looked between them, and asked brightly, "Is she finally my dad's girlfriend?" The air went completely still. Ethan felt it then. The sense that whatever this woman was asking, it wasn't small, and saying yes or no would change everything. Subscribe to Just Dad Things for more powerful single dad stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. By the time the sun came up over Maple Ridge each morning, Ethan Cole was already awake. Not because he wanted to be, but because life didn't leave him much choice. The alarm on his phone went off at 5:30, and he'd silence it quickly, careful not to wake Mia. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, doing the math in his head before his feet even hit the floor. Rent. Parts invoices. Electricity for the shop. School lunch money. It was always numbers first, feelings later. The shop had been his lifeline since his wife died. It was small, cramped, and old, but it was his. Every dented toolbox and oil-stained rag carried proof that he was still standing. Some days were good steady work, familiar customers, cash in the drawer. Other days were terrifyingly quiet. Ethan had learned to read silence like a warning sign. Silence meant bills piling up. Silence meant he'd lie awake at night, pretending not to worry, while Mia slept down the hall. Mia was 8 years old and far too smart for her own good. She packed her backpack the night before without being asked. She noticed when Ethan skipped dinner or claimed he wasn't hungry. She never complained when he said they'd have to wait until next month for something small, a book fair, a new pair of sneakers, a class trip. She just nodded and said, "That's okay, Dad," with a smile that cut deeper than any argument ever could. Ethan did everything he could to make her world feel steady. Breakfast was always ready, even if it was simple. He walked her to school when he could, waving until she disappeared inside. At night, he sat on the edge of her bed and listened to her talk about her day, the kids who were loud, the ones who were mean, the ones she worried about. He nodded, asked questions, remembered details. Because that was his job now, to be everything. After Mia fell asleep, the house went quiet in a way that felt heavier than noise. Ethan washed dishes slowly, fixed things that didn't really need fixing, avoided the empty chair at the table. He didn't talk about his wife much, not because he'd forgotten her, but because remembering hurt, and hurting felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Money was a constant shadow. He never said the word broke, but he lived with it. When a customer asked for a discount, he gave it if they needed it. When someone couldn't pay right away, he told them it was fine. People trusted him, and that trust mattered more to him than profit. But trust didn't pay suppliers, and it didn't fix the ancient heater that coughed through winter nights. Still, Ethan showed up every day. He worked with quiet focus, sleeves rolled up, grease under his nails. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for help. He just kept going, because Mia was watching, even when she pretended not to be. She watched the way he flinched when the phone rang late. She noticed the envelopes he tucked quickly into drawers. She noticed how carefully he smiled. Mia didn't understand everything, But she understood enough to know her dad was holding the world together with his bare hands. Losing the shop wasn't just about income. It was about dignity, about being the kind of father who could say yes when his daughter asked for something simple, about being able to look her in the eye and promise things would be okay and mean it. Ethan's reputation mattered too. In a town like Maple Ridge, people talked. One bad mistake, one misunderstanding, and trust could disappear overnight. If customers stopped coming, there was no safety net, no backup plan. Just him and Mia and a future that suddenly felt fragile. That was why he was careful. Why he avoided risks. Why he said no to anything that might disrupt their fragile balance. His entire life was built around one unspoken rule: protect Mia at all costs. So when a woman walked into his shop that rainy afternoon and asked him for something that made no sense, something reckless and unpredictable, Ethan didn't just hear desperation in her voice. He heard danger. Because whatever she was asking for, even if it only lasted one day, had the power to shake the careful structure he'd built. And if that structure fell, it wouldn't just be him who paid the price. It would be Mia. Lena didn't explain everything at once. She stood there in Ethan's shop, rainwater darkening the floor beneath her shoes, breathing like she'd run the whole way. Ethan offered her a chair. She didn't sit. Her eyes kept flicking to the door, as if someone might walk in and drag her away the moment she stopped talking. "There's a woman," she finally said. "Her name is Margaret Holloway." The name alone seemed to drain what little color Lena had left. Ethan listened without interrupting, leaning against the workbench, arms crossed, grease still on his hands. He had no idea who Margaret Holloway was, but he could tell she carried weight. The way Lena said her name wasn't fear exactly. It was something colder, like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing one wrong step would end everything. Margaret Holloway was a senior executive for the regional grocery chain that owned the Maple Ridge Fresh Market. She oversaw staffing, performance, and compliance. According to Lena, she was known for being precise, composed, and relentless about standards, not cruel, not loud, just exacting. The kind of person who never raised her voice because she never had to. Lena explained that layoffs had swept through the company months earlier. People disappeared from the schedule without warning. When Margaret visited the store, managers scrambled, employees straightened shelves that were already straight, and everyone held their breath. Stability mattered to corporate. Appearances mattered. And during one tense meeting, Lena's manager had mentioned casually, falsely, that Lena was engaged, settled, reliable. Lena hadn't corrected her. "At the time, I thought it didn't matter," Lena said, her voice cracking. "I thought it would just fade." It hadn't. Instead, the story had grown legs, notes in her file, conversations she hadn't been part of. And now, corporate was coming to Maple Ridge for a family appreciation event. A full visit, photos, handshakes, introductions. Margaret Holloway would be there, and she would expect to meet the fiancé she believed existed. If Lena showed up alone, it wouldn't just be awkward. It would be a lie exposed in front of the people who controlled her future. Termination was likely, quiet, professional, immediate. Ethan finally understood why Lena looked like she was drowning. Lena's job wasn't just a paycheck. It was how she paid rent, how she helped her parents, how she covered her father's medication. Losing it would ripple outward, hurting people who depended on her just as much as Mia depended on Ethan. Margaret Holloway, in Lena's mind, wasn't a villain. She was a gatekeeper. Calm, polished, and impossibly far removed from the consequences of her decisions. She represented everything Lena couldn't fight: policy, paperwork, judgment delivered with a polite smile. Ethan pictured her instantly, neatly dressed, confident, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make people stand straighter without saying a word. He'd met people like that before, Bank officers, inspectors, suppliers. They never look down on you directly. They just look past you. That's why it has to look real, Lena said quietly. Just for one day. Ethan felt the imbalance settle in his chest. This wasn't about romance or pretending. It was about power. About a system that didn't care how hard someone worked, only how their life appeared on paper. Margaret Holloway didn't know Lena was scared. She didn't know how close she was to losing everything. And she didn't have to be cruel to be terrifying. She just had to show up. Ethan said yes without making it sound like a favor. He didn't ask for details first, didn't negotiate, didn't name a price. When Lena tried to offer him money, her voice rushing, hands shaking, he shook his head. "Keep it," he said simply. "If I'm doing this, I'm doing it right." That night, after the shop lights were off and the rain had thinned to a mist, Lena came to his house so they could talk through what the day would look like. Mia sat at the kitchen table coloring, pretending not to listen while absorbing every word. Ethan made grilled cheese, poured milk, and let the conversation happen around the ordinary rhythm of dinner. They didn't rehearse like actors. They talked like people trying not to fail. Where they supposedly met. How long they'd been together. What they did on weekends. Ethan asked careful questions, not to perfect the lie, but to make sure Lena wouldn't trip over it. When she panicked and forgot details, he slowed her down. Breathe, one step at a time. After Mia went to bed, they sat at the table longer than planned. Lena talked about work, about always trying to be invisible and still somehow standing out. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt or correct her. He just paid attention. When she apologized again for asking him, he didn't let her finish. "You're not asking for something wrong," he said. "You're asking not to lose everything." The next morning, he ironed the only button-down shirt he owned. He made sure Mia's hair was neat, her shoes clean. When they picked Lena up, she looked like she might bolt before getting into the truck. Ethan didn't rush her. He opened the door, waited, and once she was inside, he drove like it was any other Saturday. The grocery store parking lot was transformed. Balloons, banners, folding tables, employees with families. Ethan felt the eyes immediately, felt the quiet measuring that came with unfamiliar faces. He kept his posture relaxed, his voice steady. He introduced Mia with pride. He thanked staff who offered snacks. He smiled when it mattered and stayed quiet when it didn't. When questions came, he answered without overthinking. How long had they been together? Long enough to matter. What did he do? Fixed cars. Loved his work. Loved his kid. Nothing flashy. Nothing rehearsed. Just honest words wrapped around a borrowed story. Lena watched him in disbelief. He never tried to impress. He never tried to sell himself. When someone spoke over her, he shifted slightly so she wasn't crowded. When her hands trembled, he handed her a cup of water without drawing attention. He stood close enough that she didn't feel alone, but never so close that it felt forced. Margaret Holloway arrived without ceremony. No entourage. No raised voice. Just a calm presence that seemed to sharpen the air. She shook Ethan's hand, looked him in the eye, and asked about his shop. He answered plainly. No complaints, no excuses. Just facts, Margaret observed. She always did. She noticed how Ethan spoke to store clerks with the same respect he gave managers. How Mia clung to him without fear. How Lena visibly steadied when he was near. She didn't smile much. She didn't soften. But she didn't look away either. Ethan didn't know he was being evaluated. He just did what he always did when things mattered. He showed up. He stayed calm. He protected the people beside him without making a show of it. And slowly, without a single speech or promise, something shifted. Margaret Holloway noticed. The longer the event went on, the harder it became to stay invisible. At first, Ethan and Lena blended into the background like any other couple. Families clustered around tables. Kids ran between balloons. Music played softly through outdoor speakers. But little by little, attention found them anyway. Someone asked for a photo. Someone else asked how they met. A manager laughed too loudly at something Ethan said, and suddenly more people were listening. Then Margaret Holloway stepped up to the microphone. She thanked employees for their dedication, spoke about loyalty and commitment, about how stability mattered in uncertain times. Her voice was calm, professional, measured. But when she gestured toward Lena, it felt like a spotlight snapped on. Employees like Lena Park, Margaret said, are the backbone of this company. Consistent, reliable, supported by a strong family. Applause rolled through the crowd. Lena smiled because she had to. Her hands trembled at her sides. Ethan felt it immediately, felt the way her breathing changed. He shifted closer, not touching her, just enough to remind her she wasn't alone. Cameras flashed. A few coworkers whispered behind their hands. Someone said something about how lucky Lena was. Someone else nodded and agreed. The lie was no longer private. It was being celebrated. They were pulled into games meant for couples. A trivia challenge. A silly relay. Ethan didn't try to win, but somehow they did anyway, not because they were pretending well, but because they listened to each other. When Ethan didn't know an answer, Lena did. When Lena hesitated, Ethan steadied her with a quiet word. Laughter came easily now, too easily, and that scared her more than the scrutiny. Each cheer felt heavier than the last. Margaret watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. When she finally approached again, she complimented Ethan on his shop, on his work ethic, on raising a polite, confident child. She told Lena she had chosen well. Chosen well. The words made Lena's stomach twist. Then the music cut out abruptly. A sharp cry cut through the noise. Someone shouted for help. Near the entrance, an older man had collapsed beside a display. People froze, unsure what to do. A circle formed, tight and panicked. Someone called out for a manager. Someone else fumbled with a phone. Ethan was already moving. He knelt beside the man, calm and focused, asking simple questions, checking breathing, clearing space. He raised his voice just enough to give directions, steady and firm. He asked someone to call emergency services, another to bring water. He kept the crowd back without snapping, without panic. Lena watched, stunned. This wasn't part of the act. This was Ethan exactly as he was when things went wrong. Grounded. Capable. Unafraid. Margaret watched too. By the time paramedics arrived, the man was conscious and breathing steadily. Applause broke out again, spontaneous this time. Someone clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Someone thanked him loudly. A few people recorded on their phones. Ethan stepped back as soon as he could, uncomfortable with the attention. He washed his hands, returned to Lena, checked on Mia. To him, it was over. Just something that needed doing. To everyone else, it was proof. The praise intensified after that. Margaret spoke to Ethan privately, thanking him. She told Lena she should be proud. She told them both how important it was to have people like them representing the company's values. Then, without warning, Margaret made another announcement. She called Lena forward, spoke about her years of service, her reliability, her leadership potential. She announced Lena's promotion, effective immediately, assistant manager. The applause was deafening. Lena felt dizzy. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet. She heard her name, heard people cheering, saw coworkers smiling at her with something close to envy. She smiled back because everyone was watching. Ethan clapped too, slower than the others. His chest felt tight. He saw the way Lena's eyes shone, not with joy, but with fear. This wasn't relief. This was the lie growing roots. They had come for one day, one borrowed story. Now that story was reshaping Lena's life in real time. Margaret shook Lena's hand, congratulated her, said a few quiet words Ethan couldn't hear. Cameras flashed again. Someone asked when the wedding was. Laughter followed. Mia tugged gently at Ethan's sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "is Lena okay?" Ethan knelt to her level. "She will be," he said softly, though he wasn't sure. As the event wound down, the celebration didn't fade. It followed them. People waved, people smiled, people assumed. Lena's phone buzzed with messages she didn't read. Her promotion felt like a trophy made of glass, beautiful, fragile, dangerous to hold. In the parking lot, away from the noise, Lena finally stopped. Her breath hitched, her shoulders shook. Ethan stood with her, shielding her from passing cars, from curious glances. "This is wrong," she said. "I didn't earn this. I lied." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't minimize it. He looked back at the store, at the banner still fluttering, at the system that had rewarded a story instead of the truth. The lie hadn't collapsed. It had succeeded. And that made everything so much worse. The drive away from the store was quiet in the way that meant something was wrong. The celebration noise faded behind them, replaced by the hum of the road and the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers. Lena sat stiff in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead. Mia was unusually silent in the back, her earlier excitement drained away, replaced by a careful watchfulness she tried to hide. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but his thoughts were everywhere at once. He'd helped fix engines with fewer moving parts than the mess they were in now. What was supposed to be one harmless day had turned into something heavier, something that couldn't just be handed back at the end of the night. They didn't speak until they reached Lena's apartment. The engine idled, while the rain tapped softly on the hood. Lena didn't reach for the door. "I shouldn't be happy," she said finally, her voice breaking. "Everyone thinks I am, but I'm not." Ethan turned the engine off and waited. "I didn't earn that promotion," she said. "I got it because of a lie. Because I looked stable. Because I stood there pretending my life was something it wasn't." Her words tumbled out faster now, the guilt spilling over. She pressed her palms against her eyes, shaking. "What if they find out later? What if they take it back? What if I lose everything because I couldn't tell the truth when it mattered?" Ethan felt the weight of it settle in his chest. He understood fear built on responsibility. He lived there. But now Mia was part of it too, and that thought made his stomach tighten. "We can figure this out," he said, though the words sounded thinner than he wanted. Lena shook her head. "You don't understand. I dragged you into this. I dragged your daughter into this." At the mention of Mia, the back door creaked open slightly. Mia hadn't meant to listen. She just wanted to make sure everyone was okay. She stood there, small and uncertain, catching pieces of a conversation she didn't fully understand, but understanding enough to feel the blame land on her shoulders. Ethan noticed her too late. Mia slipped back into her seat without a word, staring at the floor. Her chest felt tight in a way she didn't have words for. She'd been so sure, so excited. She'd wanted Lena there, wanted her dad to smile more. Now everyone sounded sad, and Mia's mind did what children's minds often do. It connected the dots in the simplest, most painful way. This was her fault. On the drive home, Mia watched the raindrops race down the window and told herself she wouldn't say anything. Grown-ups fix things. That was what they always said, but the knot in her stomach wouldn't go away. That night, after Lena went inside and the door closed behind her, Ethan drove home in silence. He tucked Mia into bed, helped her brush her teeth, read her favorite book. She leaned into him longer than usual, her arms tight around his neck. "Dad?" she whispered. "Yeah, kiddo? I didn't mean to make things hard." The words hit him harder than anything else that day. He sat on the edge of her bed, his throat closing. "You didn't," he said immediately. "None of this is on you." Mia nodded, but she didn't look convinced. When he turned off the light, she faced the wall, small shoulders curled inward. Ethan went to the kitchen and leaned against the counter, exhaustion crashing over him. He replayed every decision, every moment he could have said no. He had wanted to help. He had wanted to show Mia that kindness mattered. Instead, he put her in the middle of a moral mess she shouldn't have to carry. What if this blew up? What if Lena lost her job anyway? What if his involvement hurt his reputation? What if Mia learned the wrong lesson, that lying worked, that appearances mattered more than truth? Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. He felt like he'd failed in every direction at once. Helping Lena had seemed like the right thing, but the right thing wasn't supposed to feel like this. It wasn't supposed to make his daughter question herself. It wasn't supposed to twist his stomach with fear about what tomorrow might bring. Somewhere down the hall, Mia shifted in her sleep. Ethan stood there in the quiet kitchen, staring at the dark window, knowing they were standing at the edge of something that could either be fixed or break them all. By morning, the decision had already been made, even if neither of them had said it out loud yet. Ethan picked Lena up before work, the sky still low and gray, the streets quiet. She looked like she hadn't slept. He hadn't either. They didn't talk much on the drive, but there was a steadiness between them now. The kind that comes after fear has burned itself out and left only resolve. They walked into the fresh market together. Word had already spread about the promotion. Congratulations floated through the air. Smiles followed Lena down the aisle. She nodded, returned them politely, her heart pounding harder with every step. Ethan stayed beside her, close but not shielding her. This wasn't something he could do for her. This was something they had to face together. Margaret Holloway was in the conference area with several managers, reviewing paperwork. She looked up when she saw them approach. Her expression was neutral, professional, unreadable. "Good morning," she said. "Is everything all right?" Lena swallowed. Her hands trembled, but she didn't hide them. "No," she said. "It's not." A few people nearby slowed, sensing something. Ethan felt the familiar instinct to pull Lena out of the room, to protect her from eyes and judgment. Instead, he stayed still. Lena took a breath. Then another. "I need to tell you the truth," she said, her voice steady despite the strain. "About yesterday. About Ethan. About the engagement." The room quieted completely. Ethan spoke next, his voice calm even. "We met only recently. What you saw at the event wasn't real at first." She asked me to help because she was scared. I agreed. I didn't think it would go as far as it did. A manager frowned. Someone else shifted uncomfortably. Lena forced herself to keep going. "I didn't correct the lie when it started months ago. That's on me. I was afraid of losing my job. But I can't accept a promotion built on something untrue. If that means I lose it, if that means I lose my job, I understand." The words hung in the air like something fragile. Margaret didn't speak right away. She studied them both, her gaze lingering on Ethan, then returning to Lena. For a moment, Lena braced herself for the quiet dismissal she'd imagined so many times. Then Margaret exhaled. "I already knew," she said. The room stilled in a different way this time. Lena blinked. "You knew?" Margaret nodded. "I've been doing this a long time. People who lie to protect themselves look different from people who lie to manipulate. You were the first, and frankly, you weren't very good at hiding your fear." A murmur rippled through the room. Margaret turned slightly so others could hear her clearly. The promotion was approved before the family event. It was based on your performance, your attendance, your training record, and your reliability over several years. Your personal life had nothing to do with it. Lena felt her knees weaken. Ethan shifted instinctively closer. "As for yesterday," Margaret continued, "what I saw was a man who stepped in during a medical emergency without hesitation. A child who felt safe and proud, and an employee who has earned respect long before she ever stood next to anyone." She looked directly at Ethan now. "You didn't posture. You didn't try to impress. You treated people with dignity. That matters." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest he hadn't realized he was holding. Margaret's voice softened, just slightly. "If anything, the pressure placed on you, Lena, was a failure on our part. And for that, I apologize." Silence followed. Then someone nodded. Then someone else. The tension that had filled the room shifted, replaced by something warmer. Respect. Relief. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from fear. "Thank you," she whispered. Margaret straightened. "Your promotion stands. Your position is secure, and going forward, we'll focus on the work you do, not the assumptions we make." When Ethan and Lena stepped back into the store, the air felt different. People looked at them openly now, without whispers. A few employees smiled, genuine this time. Someone clapped Lena on the shoulder and said she deserved it. Outside, Ethan finally let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped for days. "You okay?" he asked. Lena nodded, laughing softly through tears. "I think I am." For the first time since this all began, the truth had been enough, and in choosing it, they hadn't lost everything. They'd gained something better, their dignity. The weeks that followed didn't feel miraculous. They felt steady. And for Ethan, that mattered more than anything else. Lena settled into her new role, slowly, deliberately. She didn't walk into the store like someone who had been rescued. She walked in like someone who belonged there. Coworkers came to her with questions. Schedules ran smoother. Problems were handled before they grew sharp edges. Margaret noticed, not with praise, but with trust. The kind that said, "Keep going." For the first time in a long while, Lena slept through the night. Ethan noticed the changes in his own life in quieter ways. The shop stayed busy. Word spread, not about the family event or the emergency, but about how he treated people. A customer mentioned how he didn't overcharge. Another said Ethan had stayed late to make sure their car was safe. Someone new came in because a lady at the store had recommended him. The register didn't overflow, but it didn't feel empty either. Bills got paid on time, the heater got fixed. The relationship between Ethan and Lena didn't rush forward like a movie montage. There were no dramatic declarations or sweeping gestures. There were conversations instead, honest ones. Sometimes awkward, sometimes heavy. They talked about what scared them, about boundaries, about Mia. They agreed on one thing early: nothing would be hidden again. Dates were simple: coffee after work. Takeout eaten at Ethan's kitchen table while Mia did homework nearby. Walks around the neighborhood where silence wasn't uncomfortable. When disagreements came, they didn't pretend they didn't exist. They talked through them, slowly, carefully. Mia noticed everything. At first, she watched them like someone waiting for the floor to drop out from under her. She listened closely to their tones, tracked moods, braced for tension that never quite arrived. Gradually, the tightness in her shoulders eased. She laughed more. She stopped asking if everything was okay every time voices rose even slightly. One night, while Lena helped her with a school project, Mia looked up and smiled without thinking. No calculation. No worry, just a smile. Later, as Ethan tucked her into bed, she whispered, "You're not sad all the time anymore." Ethan swallowed. "Neither are you." The shop and the store became part of the same quiet rhythm. Mornings were still early. Life was still work. But it didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like building. Ethan didn't feel like he was waiting for something to fall apart. Lena didn't feel like she was standing on borrowed ground. Mia didn't feel like she had to hold the world together with careful words. Nothing about their lives was perfect. There were still bills, still tired days, still moments of doubt. But there was also trust now. A sense that when something went wrong, they could face it honestly, together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the light fade over Maple Ridge, Mia leaned against Ethan's side and rested her head there without a word. Lena sat across from them, feet tucked beneath her, a quiet smile on her face. Ethan looked at the two people beside him and realized something simple and profound. This wasn't luck. It was what happened when truth was chosen over fear and when dignity was given room to grow. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The house was quiet in the good way that night. Mia sat at the kitchen table, tongue peeking out slightly as she focused on her homework, pencils lined up just the way she liked them. The soft scratch of graphite filled the room. Ethan stood at the counter, pouring hot water into two chipped mugs, the steam curling upward and fogging the window just a little. Lena leaned against the doorway, watching the scene like she still couldn't believe it was hers. No one was rushing. No one was bracing for bad news. They talked about small things. What Mia wanted for her school project. A customer Ethan had helped earlier that day. A scheduling change Lena had handled without panic. Ordinary moments, stitched together by an ease that hadn't existed before. Ethan handed Lena a mug, and their fingers brushed. She smiled, not shy, not apologetic, just present. They sat across from each other while Mia worked, the simple rhythm of the evening settling around them like a blanket. At one point, Mia looked up and said, "I like it when it's like this." Ethan felt the words settle deep in his chest. Later, after Mia was tucked into bed and the lights were dimmed, Ethan stood in the doorway of her room for a moment longer than usual. He listened to her steady breathing. Safe. Content. He realized how close he'd come to teaching her that kindness was dangerous, that helping someone meant losing everything. Instead, she'd seen something else. She'd seen honesty chosen when it was hard. She'd seen fear faced instead of hidden. She'd seen that one small act of kindness, given without expectation, could shift the course of an entire life. Back in the kitchen, Lena rinsed their mugs and set them carefully in the rack. She met Ethan's eyes, and nothing needed to be said. The future wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady. It was real. And for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't afraid of it. If this story touched you, subscribe to Just Dad Things for more single dad stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.